I never imagined I would leave my husband and both our families stranded at a luxury restaurant with a $22,000 bill while I sat in my friend's apartment sipping tea and watching the security footage of the moment my husband slapped me across the face in front of everyone we knew. But that is exactly what happened. Just 30 minutes after my husband Blake shoved his hand across my cheek in the middle of Zuma, Miami, causing my grandmother's 3-carat diamond engagement ring to fly off my finger and crack against the marble floor. Instead of apologizing, he laughed and said I was being dramatic. My parents laughed along with him. His parents laughed too. But their smiles would vanish the moment I whispered to the restaurant manager in Spanish, "Charge everything to my card. Let them order whatever they want, but I'm leaving now and I need the security footage." I would pay every penny without blinking. The cost of my freedom was a shattered heirloom and one night of clarity. My regrets? 0. Before I tell you how I got there, please subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on this story, whether you think I did the right thing or if you would have handled it differently. Your support means everything. To understand how I ended up walking out of that restaurant, I need to tell you who I was before that night. I am Renata Vega. To the world, I am an ER doctor at Miami-Jackson Memorial Hospital, someone who saves lives for a living and makes $280,000 a year doing it. But to my family, I was simply the bank. The only reason I had supported them for the past 3 years lies in a promise I made to my grandmother before she passed away from cancer. I can still see that hospital room in Coral Gables, the way the afternoon light filtered through the Venetian blinds and made stripes across her blanket. The smell of disinfectant mixed with the flowers my mother had brought, white roses that were already wilting in the Florida heat. Abuela's hands were cold when she took mine, her skin paper-thin and spotted with bruises from the IV needles. She had been strong once, the kind of woman who fled Cuba with nothing but the clothes on her back and jewelry sewn into the hem of her skirt. But cancer doesn't care about strength. "Renata," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the beeping monitors. "Ven aquí." I leaned closer, my hand wrapped around hers. She reached for her right hand with trembling fingers and slowly twisted off her engagement ring, the 3-carat diamond that had survived a revolution, an ocean crossing, and 50 years in a new country. "Take this," she said, pressing it into my palm. "Abuela, no, you should keep it." Her grip tightened with surprising force. "Listen to me, mija. You are strong. I raised you to be strong, like the women in our family." I nodded, tears burning in my eyes. "But strength is not the same as sacrifice," she continued, her dark eyes searching mine. "Do not confuse the two." I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. "Take care of yourself first," she said, her voice growing weaker. "Promise me." "I promise, Abuela." She smiled, a small, sad smile, and closed her eyes. 2 days later, she was gone. I wore that ring every day after the funeral. The weight of it on my right hand was constant, familiar, grounding. The 3-carat diamond caught the light in the ER when I was stitching wounds, when I was running codes, when I was holding the hand of someone's mother while we waited for the inevitable. It reminded me that I came from women who survived, who endured, who built something from nothing. But I didn't understand what Abuela had been trying to tell me until the night Blake hit me. I thought strength meant saying yes when my parents needed their mortgage paid. I thought strength meant covering my in-laws' medical bills without complaint. I thought strength meant being the person everyone could lean on, no matter how heavy they became. But that's not strength. That's drowning while pretending you can still breathe. For my husband Blake's 35th birthday, I planned an elaborate dinner at Zuma, Miami. I wanted to do something special, something that would make him feel celebrated and valued. I wanted, stupidly, to believe that generosity might finally earn me the respect I had been working for since the day we got married. I booked the best table overlooking the ocean 2 months in advance, ordered the premium omakase tasting menu, arranged for vintage Dom Perignon to be waiting when we arrived. Blake insisted we invite both sets of parents. My parents, Marshall and Lorraine, who had immigrated from Cuba in the 80s with my grandmother and still carried that immigrant mentality that successful children know their parents everything. Blake's parents, Douglas and Francine, who had raised their son to believe that his wife's success somehow diminished his masculinity, that a man whose wife made more money was less of a man. The dinner was set for December 14th, a Thursday evening when the Miami skyline would be lit up like a constellation and the ocean would reflect the city lights like a dark mirror. On the afternoon of the 14th, he finished a 48-hour shift at the hospital. I had held a man's chest together with my bare hands while we waited for the trauma surgeon, had pronounced a 19-year-old dead after a motorcycle accident, had stitched up a child who had fallen through a glass door. I drove home to our Brickell condominium, the one I owned, the one Blake lived in rent-free, and found him on the couch in his underwear, watching television at 4 in the afternoon. "Blake," I said quietly, setting my keys on the counter, "you should start getting ready. Our reservation is at 7. He didn't look up from his phone. "I know," he snapped. "Stop nagging me." I let it go. I always let it go. I showered, washing the hospital smell from my skin, the smell of blood and antiseptic and other people's suffering. I stood in front of the mirror in our bedroom and fastened my grandmother's ring onto my right hand, the way I did every morning. The diamond caught the light from the bathroom, sending small rainbows across the wall. I chose a simple black dress, elegant but not showy, and black heels. I looked at myself in the mirror and thought about my grandmother in that hospital bed, thought about her pressing this ring into my palm. Take care of yourself first. At 6:45, Blake was still on the couch in his t-shirt and jeans. "Blake, we need to leave in 10 minutes. He stood up with a dramatic sigh, as if I were asking him to climb a mountain instead of get dressed for his own birthday dinner. We took an Uber to the restaurant because Blake wanted to drink and I was too exhausted to argue about who would drive home. In the back seat, I watched the Miami skyline pass by, watched Blake scroll through his phone, his jaw tight, his fingers moving too fast. A name flashed across his screen for just a second before he tilted it away. Jenna. I had known about Jenna for 3 months. The memory came back sharp and unwelcome, the way memories do when you've been trying not to think about them. It was September, 3 months before the birthday dinner. I'd come home early from a shift because a pipe had burst in the ER and they'd sent half the staff home. Blake was in the shower and I was putting his suit jacket away when I felt something in the pocket. A hotel receipt. The Setai, Miami Beach. Room 412. One night, September 7th. 2 breakfast orders charged to the room. I stood there in our bedroom holding that piece of paper, my hand steady even though my heart was racing. September 7th was the night Blake had told me he was working late, closing a big real estate deal in Fort Lauderdale. I had texted him at 9 p.m. to ask if he wanted me to save him dinner. He had texted back, still at the office, "Don't wait up." But he hadn't been at the office. He had been at the Setai with someone who ordered room service breakfast. I put the receipt back in his pocket. I didn't say anything. Not that night, not the next morning, not ever. Because I was still trying to figure out if saving this marriage was worth the effort or if I was just too exhausted to leave. And because part of me, the part that sounded like my mother's voice, kept saying, "Maybe you're wrong. Maybe there's an explanation. Don't be paranoid." But I wasn't wrong. Over the next 3 months, I saw the signs I'd been trained as a doctor to notice. The way he smiled at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. The way he showered immediately when he came home, even if he'd supposedly been sitting in an office all day. The way he stopped touching me, stopped asking about my day, stopped pretending to care. And then there was the night I picked up his phone to check the time because mine was charging in the bedroom, and I saw a text notification. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I miss you already." I put the phone down and walked away. Tomorrow was a Saturday. Blake had told me he had to work, but I still didn't say anything. Because confronting him meant admitting that my marriage was a lie, and I wasn't ready to face that truth yet. So when his phone lit up in the Uber on the way to his birthday dinner and I saw Jenna's name flash across the screen, I felt my stomach drop, even though I'd been expecting it. Blake silenced the call and shoved his phone into his pocket, his face going red. I looked out the window and said nothing. The Uber driver turned up the radio, some pop song I didn't recognize, and we rode the rest of the way in silence. Zuma, Miami rose against the night sky like a temple of glass and steel. The entrance smelled like expensive cologne and burning wood from the open kitchen, like money and exclusivity, and the kind of place where people came to be seen. The manager, Santiago, greeted me by name, not Blake, because he had done his research and knew exactly who was paying for tonight. "Dr. Vega," he said, extending his hand, "welcome. Your table is ready." I shook his hand and smiled. "Thank you, Santiago." Blake's jaw tightened when Santiago called me doctor. He hated being reminded that I had a title and he didn't, that I had spent 8 years in medical school and residency, while he had dropped out of community college after 1 semester. "Santiago," Blake said, forcing a smile, "good to see you again." Santiago nodded politely, but didn't shake his hand. "This way, please." He led us through the restaurant, past tables where beautiful people ate beautiful food and pretended not to notice anyone else. Our table was by the window, exactly where I'd requested, with a perfect view of the Miami skyline and the ocean stretching out into darkness. Our parents arrived 10 minutes later. My mother, Lorraine, came in first, already gushing over the decor, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the minimalist Japanese aesthetic that probably cost more per square foot than her mortgage payment. Blake's mother, Francine, came in behind her, wearing too much jewelry and too much perfume, eyeing me with that look she always had. The look that said I wasn't good enough for her son, despite the fact that I paid for his life. My father, Marshall, shook Blake's hand with that firm, alpha male grip men do when they're trying to establish dominance. "Happy birthday, son." Blake beamed under the attention. "Thanks, Marshall." Douglas, Blake's father, clapped him on the back. 35, getting old. Blake laughed. "Not as old as you." They all laughed, that easy, comfortable laughter of people who had never had to worry about paying for anything because someone else always did. We sat down at the table, the skyline glittering behind us like a promise of everything I'd worked for and everything I'd lost along the way. The waiter appeared immediately, dressed in black, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone who worked in a place where tips started at $500. "Good evening," he said. "My name is Marcus, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Blake didn't wait for anyone else. "We'll start with a bottle of Dom Perignon Vintage 2008, he said, waving his hand like a king ordering wine for his court. I smiled and said nothing. $1,200 for one bottle. My mother draped her napkin across her lap and smiled at Blake with that sugary sweetness she reserved for men. "So Blake, how's work going?" Blake straightened in his chair, grateful for the attention, for someone asking about him instead of me for once. "Good," he said. "Really good, actually. Closed 2 contracts this month, both over $1 million. Francine beamed like he'd just won a Nobel Prize. "That's wonderful, darling. You work so hard." I had been on a 48-hour shift 3 days ago. I had held a dying man's hand while his family stood in the hallway, crying. I had come home and found Blake asleep on the couch with empty beer bottles on the coffee table and sports highlights playing on the television. But no one asked me about work. My father, Marshall, raised his glass of water, since the champagne hadn't arrived yet. To Blake, he said, another year older and wiser. We all clinked glasses. I took a sip of ice water that tasted like nothing and felt like swallowing glass. The champagne arrived in an ice bucket, condensation already forming on the dark green glass. Marcus opened it with a soft pop, poured a taste for Blake even though I was the one who had ordered it and was paying for it. Blake swirled it, sniffed it, took a sip, and nodded with exaggerated expertise. Perfect. Marcus filled everyone's glasses. The appetizers arrived next, delicate slivers of sashimi arranged like art on black slate plates, each piece worth more than most people spent on an entire meal. My mother leaned toward me as she picked up her chopsticks. Renata, she said quietly as if we were discussing the weather, don't forget about the mortgage payment next month. It's due on the 5th. I swallowed a piece of tuna that suddenly tasted like cardboard. I won't forget, Mom. Francine chimed in from across the table, dabbing her mouth with her napkin. And Renata, dear, Douglas needs his heart medication refilled. The pharmacy said the payment didn't go through last week. I'll handle it, I said quietly, reaching for my champagne. My father added, almost as an afterthought, and the car insurance is due this month too, just so you remember. I took a long drink of $1,200 champagne and felt it burn in my chest. Blake's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced down. His face went red. He silenced it quickly and shoved it into his pocket, but I had seen the name on the screen. Jenna? Who was that? I asked, my voice casual, genuinely curious, not accusatory. The table went silent. Blake's eyes snapped up to meet mine, and I saw something flash across his face. Guilt, then anger, then defensiveness. What? I just asked who called, I said, keeping my voice calm. His hand tightened around his champagne flute so hard I thought it might shatter. Are you serious right now? I blinked, confused by the sudden aggression. You're always doing this, he said, his voice rising, always accusing me of something, always making me feel like I'm not good enough. I wasn't accusing you of anything, I said quietly, aware that people at other tables were starting to look. Yes, you were, he stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound like a scream. You think just because you're a doctor you can talk down to me? You think you're better than me. Blake, I said, my voice still calm but my heart starting to race. Sit down. People are staring. I don't care, he shouted, his face going purple. You always do this, always embarrass me in front of everyone. I wasn't embarrassing you, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew it was too late. And that's when he did it. His hand came across my face so fast, I didn't have time to brace for it. The slap echoed through the restaurant like a gunshot. My cheek exploded in heat and pain. My head snapped to the side. The entire restaurant went silent. 50 people, frozen, mid-bite, mid-conversation, mid-breath. Waiters stopped moving. Conversations died. Even the music from the open kitchen seemed to fade. And then I heard it. The worst sound I have ever heard in my life. Laughter. My mother's voice came first, light and dismissive. Oh, Renata, you probably deserve that for embarrassing him. Then Francine shaking her head with a small smile. Honestly, Blake, she does provoke you sometimes, but you shouldn't do that in public. My father chuckled, actually chuckled, as if this were all a big joke. Women need to learn when to keep quiet, he said, raising his glass. Douglas, Blake's father, joined in. Back in my day, that's just how you kept your wife in line. Nothing wrong with it. They were laughing. All 4 of them. Laughing. While my face burned and my eyes filled with tears, I refused to let fall. While 50 strangers stared at me with pity and disgust and secondhand embarrassment. And then I heard another sound, a small metallic clink against the marble floor. I looked down. My grandmother's ring had flown off my finger from the force of the slap. It lay on the ground 3 feet away, the diamond facing up, catching the light from the chandeliers. And even from where I sat, I could see it. A crack. A thin white line running through the center of the stone like a scar, like a wound that would never heal. I stared at it. Abuela's ring. The one she wore when she fled Cuba with nothing but the clothes on her back and jewelry sewn into the hem of her skirt. The one she gave me on her deathbed, with hands that were cold and bruised from cancer. The one that had survived air evolution, an ocean crossing, and 50 years in a new country. Cracked. Blake looked down at it and laughed again, that same dismissive laugh. It's just a ring, Renata. Buy a new one. You've got the money. My mother nodded, already turning back to her food. It's true, she said. You can afford it. Something inside me that had been bending for 3 years finally snapped clean in half. I stood up slowly. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I picked up my purse from the back of my chair, pulled my coat from where it hung, and walked toward the restrooms with my head high and my back straight. Blake called after me, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Where are you going, Renata?" "Dessert isn't here yet." I didn't answer. I didn't look back. I walked past tables full of people who wouldn't meet my eyes, past waiters who pretended they hadn't seen anything, past the open kitchen where chefs worked over burning flames. I found Santiago near the bar, his face already tight with concern because he had seen everything. I switched to Spanish, the language my grandmother taught me, the language of women who survive. "Mi esposo me golpeó," I said quietly. "Necesito tu ayuda." His expression shifted immediately from professional neutrality to genuine concern. "Come with me," he said, leading me away from the dining room. He took me to his office, a small room behind the bar that smelled like leather and coffee and escape. He offered me a chair and closed the door. "Do you want me to call the police?" "Not yet," I said, "but I need 2 things from you." "Anything, Dr. Vega." I pulled out my American Express Black card from my wallet and set it on his desk. "Charge everything to this card," I said. "Let them order whatever they want, as much as they want, but don't tell them I'm paying." He raised an eyebrow, but nodded slowly. "Understood." "And when they ask for the bill," I continued, "wait 30 minutes after I leave, then bring it to them." He allowed himself a small smile. "It would be my pleasure." "And the second thing," I said, "I need a copy of your security footage from tonight, the camera that faces our table." He didn't hesitate. "I'll have it ready in 20 minutes." I sat in that leather chair in Santiago's office and opened my phone. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt cold and calm and clear, like ice water running through my veins. I opened my banking app. 3 taps. Blake Donovan, supplementary card holder, deactivate. A confirmation message appeared. "Are you sure you want to remove this user? This action cannot be undone." "Yes." Deactivated. I opened the next screen. "Douglas and Francine Donovan, medical payment authorization, cancel." "Are you sure?" "Yes." Canceled. One more. "Marshall and Lorraine Vega, mortgage auto pay, disable." "Are you sure?" "Yes." Disabled. Then I opened my email and typed a message to Patricia Chen, the divorce attorney I had consulted 3 months ago when I first found the hotel receipt, when I first started to suspect that my marriage was already gone. Subject line: emergency, need to file tonight, have evidence of domestic violence. "Patricia," I typed, "Blake hit me in public at Zuma Miami tonight. Multiple witnesses, including both sets of parents. Restaurant has security footage. I'm ready to file. Can you meet me first thing tomorrow morning?" Send. 20 minutes later, Santiago returned with a USB drive. "They just ordered their 3rd bottle of Dom Perignon," he said quietly, "and appetizers for the table, and the chef's special omakase for everyone." "Perfect," I said, standing up. I took the USB drive and slipped it into my purse next to my grandmother's ring, which I had picked up off the floor before leaving the dining room. The crack caught the light from Santiago's desk lamp. "Thank you, Santiago," I said, "for everything." He opened the door for me. "Dr. Vega," he said quietly, "I hope you find peace." "I will," I said. And I meant it. I walked out through the kitchen exit, past the chefs who were too busy to notice, past the dishwashers and prep cooks, out into the Miami night. The air hit my face, warm and thick with salt from the ocean, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe. I called an Uber. I didn't go home. I went to my friend and colleague, Dr. Sofia Rodriguez's apartment in Coral Gables, the friend who had been telling me for months to leave Blake, the friend who had seen the bruises I pretended were from work. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without a word. In the Uber, on the way there, I held my grandmother's ring in my palm. The crack caught the streetlights as we drove, a thin white line that would never heal. Abuela, I whispered, touching the stone gently, I finally understand. Strength isn't about enduring. It's about knowing when to walk away. Sophia's apartment smelled like lavender and safety. She sat me down on her couch, brought me tea I didn't drink, and waited. I pulled out my laptop and the USB drive. Do you want to see it? I asked. She nodded. I plugged in the drive and opened the video file. The footage was crystal clear, high definition, multiple angles. There was our table by the window. There was Blake, standing up, his face aired. There was me, sitting calmly, asking a simple question. And then, there it was, his hand across my face. The sound audible even through the ambient noise of the restaurant. My head snapping to the side. The ring flying through the air. And then, the laughter. My mother's face, smiling. Francine shaking her head with amusement. My father raising his glass. Douglas clapping Blake on the back as if he'd done something praiseworthy. Sophia's hand found mine and squeezed. I'm so sorry, she whispered. And that's when I finally cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent tears running down my face while Sophia held my hand and we watched the video of my marriage ending in one brutal moment. Back at the restaurant, Blake and our parents were still laughing, still drinking, still ordering. They didn't notice I had been gone for an hour. They were too busy enjoying themselves on what they thought was my unlimited credit card. The third bottle of Dom Perignon arrived. Blake ordered the chef's special omakase, the one that cost $300 per person. My mother ordered the Wagyu beef. Francine ordered another round of appetizers. They ate and drank and celebrated Blake's birthday without me, without even wondering where I'd gone. Not until Santiago appeared at the table with a leather folder. Your bill, sir, he said, placing it in front of Blake. Blake waved his hand dismissively, not even looking up from his conversation with Douglas about golf. Just put it on my wife's card. Santiago's expression didn't change. Of course, sir, however, I need to inform you that the total is $22,450. Silence fell over the table like guillotine. My father's fork clattered onto his plate. 22,000, he repeated, his voice strangled. Santiago nodded calmly, professionally. 3 bottles of Dom Perignon, vintage 2008, at $1,200 each. The premium omakase tasting menu for 6 guests, additional specialty sushi courses, Wagyu beef, tax and gratuity included. Blake's face went from confusion to panic in the space of a heartbeat. Where's Renata? She departed approximately 90 minutes ago, sir. Blake pulled out his wallet with shaking hands and produced his credit card, the supplementary card linked to my account. The card I had deactivated an hour ago while sitting in Santiago's office. Marcus, the waiter, brought the payment terminal. Santiago inserted the card. The terminal beeped once. Declined. Blake's face went white. That's impossible. Try it again. Santiago tried again. Declined. Francine fumbled through her purse with trembling hands and pulled out her credit card. Try mine. Declined. My mother's hands were shaking as she handed over her card. Please, she whispered. Declined. My father tried 3 different cards. Declined. 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 Douglas pulled out his wallet, counted the cash inside, $40. Blake stood up, his chair falling backward. I need to call my wife, he said, pulling out his phone. He dialed my number. It went straight to voicemail because I had blocked him 20 minutes ago. Santiago stood perfectly still, his face professionally neutral, but his eyes sympathetic to their panic. If you are unable to settle the bill, he said quietly, I will need to contact the authorities. It took all 6 of them an hour. Pooling every credit card they had, maxing out personal cards with $5,000 limits, scraping together cash from wallets and purses. My father had to call his bank and request an emergency credit increase. Blake's face was purple with rage and humiliation. My mother was crying. Francine kept saying this must be a mistake. There must be a mistake. Other diners pretended not to watch, while absolutely watching, pulling out their phones to take photos of the table where a birthday dinner had turned into a financial disaster. When they finally stumbled out of the restaurant 2 hours later, humiliated and financially drained, Blake's phone buzzed with an email notification. From me. Subject line, goodbye. Blake, for 3 years, I paid for your life. I paid for our parents' lives. I covered every expense while you disrespected me, cheated on me with Jenna, and tonight hit me in public while our families laughed. It's over. My attorney will contact you tomorrow morning. The security footage from tonight is already with my lawyer, along with my medical documentation of the injury. Your supplementary credit card has been canceled. Your parents' medical expenses are no longer my responsibility. My parents' mortgage payments have been stopped. The condominium in Brickell is in my name, and your belongings will be in the hallway by noon tomorrow. I am no longer anyone's bank. Renata. By the next morning, Blake returned to the Brickell condo to find the locks changed. His clothes packed neatly in boxes, stacked in the hallway. A restraining order taped to the door. He called me 17 times. I blocked his number after the first call. He showed up at the hospital that afternoon. Security escorted him out before he made it past the lobby. 1 week later, his attorney tried to argue in court that I was lying, that he never hit me, that I was being vindictive over a failed marriage and trying to destroy his reputation. My attorney, Patricia Chen, a formidable woman in her 40s who had been practicing family law for 20 years and had seen every trick in the book, simply pressed play on her laptop. The security footage filled the screen in the courtroom. Blake's hand across my face. The sound, audible, sharp, unmistakable. My grandmother's ring flying through the air in what looked like slow motion. The ring hitting the marble floor. 4 people at that table, laughing, while I sat, frozen, my hand to my cheek. The judge, a 55-year-old Cuban woman named Maria Sanchez, watched the entire video in complete silence. Then she removed her glasses slowly and looked directly at Blake. Mr. Donovan, she said, her voice cold and precise, the restraining order is extended for 1 full year. You are prohibited from coming within 100 feet of Dr. Vega. Divorce proceedings will begin immediately, and I am granting her petition for an expedited hearing. Blake started to speak, his mouth opening. She cut him off with a raised hand. 1 more word from you, and I will hold you in contempt of court. Do you understand me? Blake sat down, his face red, his hands clenched into fists. 3 months later, the divorce was final. I kept everything because we had signed a prenuptial agreement that Blake's overconfident attorney had never bothered to read carefully. The one that said all property acquired before and during the marriage in my name stayed in my name. The condo, my savings, my retirement accounts, my car, everything. Blake got nothing except his personal belongings and his mounting legal fees. He lost his real estate license temporarily when the domestic violence record showed up in his routine background check. His income dropped to 0. His parents, no longer able to afford Douglas's specialized heart medication without my financial support, had to delay critical treatments and switch to generic alternatives that weren't as effective. Douglas had a minor heart attack 4 months later. He survived, but barely. My parents, unable to make their mortgage payments without my automatic transfers every month, received foreclosure warnings within 60 days. They tried to refinance, but their credit wasn't good enough. They were eventually forced to sell their house at a loss and move into a cramped 1-bedroom apartment on the north side of Miami, the kind of neighborhood they had spent their whole lives trying to escape. They all called. They all texted. They all sent relatives and friends to lead their cases. My Aunt Rosa, my father's sister, called me crying. "Renata," she begged, "they're your parents. You can't just abandon them like this." I didn't abandon them, I said calmly. I stopped enabling them. There's a difference. But they need you. They needed my money, I corrected her. They never needed me. My mother sent an email with the subject line, "Please forgive us. We're sorry." I didn't open it. I deleted it without reading a single word. Blake's mother, Francine, showed up at the hospital one afternoon, waiting in the lobby until my shift ended. "Renata, please," she said, grabbing my arm. "Blake is suffering. He's sorry. He's changed." I pulled my arm away gently, but firmly. "Francine," I said, "your son hit me in the face and you laughed. There is no apology in the world that will make me forget that. But he's your husband." "He was my husband," I said. "Now, he's nothing to me." 6 months after that night at Zuma, I moved into a new condominium in Coconut Grove. Floor-to-ceiling windows that faced the ocean. A building where no one knew my married name, where no one knew my story, where I could start over. I furnished it slowly, deliberately, choosing every piece myself without asking anyone's opinion. A reading chair by the window where I could watch the sunrise. Plants that I chose because I liked them, not because they looked good for Instagram. Art that made me feel something, instead of art that impressed visitors. I built a life that belonged entirely to Moo. I took my grandmother's ring to a jeweler in Coral Gables, an old Cuban man named Esteban, who had known my grandmother decades ago, who remembered her from the early days when they were both new to this country. He examined the crack under his jeweler's loupe and shook his head sadly. "I cannot repair this," he said in Spanish. "The stone is compromised. The crack goes too deep. It will always be fragile." "I don't want you to repair it," I said. He looked up, surprised. "I want you to turn it into a necklace," I continued. "I want to wear the crack where I can see it every day, where I can remember what it cost me and what I gained." He looked at me for a long moment, his old eyes searching mine. Then he nodded slowly, understanding. "Your grandmother would be proud of you." I picked up the necklace a week later. My grandmother's 3-carat diamond, still cracked, suspended on a delicate platinum chain. I wore it out of his shop, the diamond resting against my collarbone. The crack caught the afternoon light, a white line that split the stone, but somehow made it more beautiful, more real, more mine. On a Sunday morning, 9 months after I left Blake at that restaurant, my friend Sophia and I walked along the beach at Key Biscayne. The sand was warm under our bare feet, the ocean endless and calm, the sky so blue it hurt to look at. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, just two friends enjoying the morning. Then Sophia asked the question I knew was coming. "Do you ever regret it?" I thought about the question as we walked. Thought about Blake's face when he realized his cards didn't work. Thought about my parents' shocked phone calls when their mortgage payment bounced. Thought about the $22,000 bill. I thought about the 3 years I spent being everyone's solution, everyone's bank, everyone's backup plan. I thought about the slap, about the laughter, about my grandmother's ring cracking on the marble floor. "Zero regrets," I said finally that night. "Cost me $22,000, but it bought me something I hadn't had in 3 years." "What's that?" "My dignity." Sophia squeezed my hand. We walked in silence for a while longer, the waves rolling in and out, steady and eternal, and completely indifferent to human drama. I touched the necklace at my throat, felt the diamond move slightly against my skin. Abuela had been right all along. Strength isn't about how much you can endure. It's about knowing when to walk away. It's about choosing yourself even when everyone tells you that's selfish. It's about understanding that you cannot save people who are determined to drown, and that going down with them doesn't make you noble. It just means there are 2 people drowning instead of 1. My parents eventually stopped calling. Blake moved back in with his parents after he lost the condo. His real estate license was reinstated after a year, but his reputation never recovered. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he blamed me for everything, that he told anyone who would listen that I had overreacted, that I was vindictive and cold and cruel. I didn't correct the narrative. I didn't defend myself to people who didn't matter. The people who mattered, the people who loved me, knew the truth. And the people who didn't matter didn't deserve an explanation. I built a life that belonged entirely to Moo. I took salsa classes on Thursday nights and learned to move my body in ways that felt free. I traveled to Portugal by myself and ate seafood by the ocean and read books in cafes and talked to strangers who became friends. I dated occasionally, carefully, refusing to settle for anything less than genuine respect and honest affection. And I thrived. Every morning when I got dressed for work, I fastened that necklace around my neck, the cracked diamond catching the light from my bedroom window. A reminder that broken things can still be beautiful. That imperfection isn't weakness, it's proof of survival. That the scars we carry can become the armor that protects us. My parents and his family laughed as my husband hit me in that restaurant. They laughed as my grandmother's ring shattered on the floor. So I left them stranded with a $22,000 bill and walked into a life where no one gets to hurt me ever again. And I would make that choice 1,000 times over. So now I want to hear from you. If you were in my position, at what point would you have drawn the line? Would you have stayed and tried to make it work? Or would you have left even sooner than I did? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? And how did you make that choice? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I genuinely want to know how you would have handled this situation. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think about the price of dignity and the cost of freedom, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Your support means the world, and it helps me keep sharing these stories. Thank you for listening, and remember, you are never obligated to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm.